So-Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates 50% of all profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SOCALLED for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org.
Work is part of life, right? In my mind, it's just have a good life. But there's something implicit about work-life balance, meaning work sucks. Right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And you're saying, okay, I need this balance because this part sucks.
This is Mark Wojcik, and I'm wondering, how's your so-called career? Welcome to So-Called, the podcast that explores the why and how of work. On today's episode, we meet Ben Price, president of SnapShot Postcard, a software company that creates mobile apps.
Primarily, our primary app is called SnapShot Postcard, and it basically takes photos from your phone, and then you compose the postcard and you use your personal photos and you add messages. And this is either on your iPhone, iPad, or Android. And then when you're done, you submit them to us and we print and mail them. And so our primary customers are people that want to mail to people in the U.S. So you could be an expat in England or whatever, and it's a lot cheaper for you to send postcards to your granny in Seattle than it would be to find a postcard or a letter and post it out of London or whatever.
I asked Ben what he likes about his role and his business.
So what I really like is being the key person responsible and being able to make the decisions and plan the strategy and everything else. I do have a partner I work with on it, but I'm the primary owner, and so I just love that. I love the fact that that right or wrong, I'm responsible, and once you discuss and once you decide, just to be able to do it and not get distracted and follow through on it. I really enjoy that, and so yeah, that's what I like the most. I also it's kind of a fun thing, to be in mobile apps, and it's I tell it to people at parties, and I can take pictures and send them postcards, and it's nice to be able to tell people what you do and show them on your phone, and I'm almost cool to like my nephews and nieces,
Okay, well, hey, there's some bragging rights right there.
Yeah. So I like that too, and it's not a heavy type service or product. It's a type of product that brings people closer together, and we need that today.
Yeah.
And I've had a few testimonials and people telling me how it's been used. You just feel good about it. I had a woman recently email me, tell me how much she loved it, and sharing, and she actually had put together this presentation for me on different things I could do to improve it. But anyway, I called Debbie and we got to talking, and she goes, "You know what, Ben, the reason I'm so emotional about this is because my dad disowned me, and we didn't talk the last 20 years of his life. And I would just send him postcards from your app, taking pictures of his grandkids. And then the last time I did see him right before he passed, and the only thing he said was thanks for the postcards."
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
now that's a testimony. Yeah. Wow.
No, I don't, that's not up on the page, but you do that and you go, oh.
Yeah, it's worth doing. So on the heels of that story, are there things about your work that you don't find as enjoyable to do?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Dealing in minutia that you kind of have to do it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you go, I didn't move this business forward today. I just sort of plugged some holes.
Yeah.
And that always kind of bugs me. It's great to do something you love, but there's always going to be, you always have to wash dishes. There's always stuff you have to do that, you just do it. Don't complain about it. But figure out a way to minimize it. Figure out a way to how to load the dishwasher quicker and eat up a paper plates or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's always ways to sort of, or potentially outsource it. But I think that's a mistake people make too often is outsourcing something. And the other thing that I don't like about my job right now is just the financial stress overall, right? Because, that's the hardest thing about this is, the app's been out a long time, but it's just been within the last year that I've tried to make it into an independent venture that support, to pay my bills, right?
Okay.
And so, there's, I've got this hard deadline that's basically July 1st that if I'm not meeting certain revenue guidelines or profitability, really not revenue, then I need to move on.
Yeah.
And I need to get a job. And so, real job. Or you work just 40 hours a week. But, And so there's that stress, and it's not, I've had some other ventures where the stress has been much, much more. There's nothing comparable, to this. But it's just it's that stress to have to perform, and the concern about, I've got to grow the business.
In that kind of that tension between, look, I've got this deadline here.
Mm-hmm.
Are there things that you find easier to do as far as moving that forward, and are there things that you find harder to do?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's, and we're all like this, right? In terms of we're introverts or extroverts, or we like product, or we like people, or we like marketing or sales. And, very few, well, I don't know anybody that loves everything, right?
Yeah.
And somebody that does is a liar. But, I find it, so, I could spend a lot of time drilling into the product, right? Because I have product marketing background and product management experience, and and I got into that because I like figuring out what you build and what brings value and what doesn't, right? But that's all you're just whistling in the dark unless you're selling enough to pay for yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's figuring out the sales and how to sell it, and not usually, and so that part is to some degree harder.
The next big thing that Ben is working on is a new app called Political Action Postcard, which has just been released. The service is a variation on the postcard concept, but with a different target audience and marketing model.
Anyway, so this is a Political Action Postcard app, and what I've done differently though is it's got a different icon, of course, but then it's all targeted differently, and then I have artwork that's politically segmented, so you can get everything from NRA to Black Lives Matter to just sort of cover things, or solar panels or whatever.
Okay.
So we have specific artwork for that if you want to use it. But the neatest thing about it is you can go, and based on your return address, it'll give you a list of all your representatives, your political leaders, from your county dog catcher to President Trump, right? And everybody down there, and you can just tap as many as you want, and it'll just address it and send the card.
Okay.
So anyway, that's the idea. But what's different about that is it's just a different use model and different. And so how am I going to market that? So that's, somebody really on the ball would have a marketing plan, and it would already be going, right? And, and being a product guy, I've built it. And this is phase 1. Phase 2 is going to be modified more towards NRA or Move On, or obviously it won't be probably that big of groups, but smaller groups can customize it for themselves.
Yeah.
But for phase 1, it's getting it out there, and then figuring out how to market, and then what are the really missing features, and then add it for phase 2. But there's I'm really excited about it.
Throughout Ben's career, he's followed his interests to find what he liked and what he didn't like about work.
You have people that have known what they're going to do and go on a pretty tight path. I've never, I use that old tired joke. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? I started, undergraduate, I was a mechanical engineer. And I was largely that because I was good at math and chemistry and calculus, what they call STEM now.
Yeah.
And everybody said you should do it. And so I did it. And, they said there's more money. And so it seemed like a good idea. And I enjoyed college. I actually did a lot of different classes too. But then when I got out and I was interviewing for jobs, actually that was early 80s or mid 80s. And basically jobs are largely building nuclear weapons for mechanical engineers.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. I took a job with Procter & Gamble in Folgers coffee plant and in production management. And, I just realized I didn't really want to do that either. So what they say is when you don't, those that can't go back to school.
Yeah.
And so I went back and got my master's. And that was in it's operations research applied math. They'd call it big data probably now, or analytics or something.
Okay.
And I was at Stanford, and then following that, I got a job out at Boeing Computer Services, where I was in this research group, and we did analytics on different product. It was basically, they called me a decision analyst.
Okay. And
that was interesting for about a year, and I just realized that it just is not in my DNA to be part of a large company. I just feel like I don't fit, and it's hard to describe. And I mean, I know. I mean, that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. I think is sort of how do we fit? How does our emotional makeup and our personal makeup fit in sort of large groups versus small groups,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
And because most people, not I don't know if it's most, it probably is. They can be energized by that as far as being part of a large organization. You go, hey, I work for HP, I work for Boeing, I work for Microsoft. It gives you an identity.
Yeah.
And but I just wasn't. I just decided large companies weren't for me, and so I bought a quick printing franchise.
Okay.
Which makes perfect sense, right? American Speedy Printing for 5 years, 1995 basically,
Uh-huh.
and 91 to 95, and that was for various reasons. I ended up selling that, getting out of that.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went into product management and software, and I was with a small company then, where I learned a lot, and really that was very indebted to that company. Learned a lot, met a lot of really good people. It was really a 20 to 30 people size, and that was sort of people talk about economies of scales for business. I think there's economies of scales for people too.
Yeah.
Right, and that was kind of my economies of scale. I seem to fit very well in there, right?
In that size of an organization.
Yeah, in that size of an organization and company. And but also you got companies that size and they're very fragile. Basically, they sold stuff to mainframes to make those big Xerox printers work.
Yeah.
So it was IBM to Xerox, and that that whole market just went away basically. So then I got on with HP. So when I went to HP, I initially did product management, but they were just getting into commercial printing at that time. I had a little bit of commercial printing background based on my quick printing business.
Yeah.
And which is just different than office printers.
Sure.
And so I basically became more of a project manager, solution consultant for these large engagements. And I like that. Basically, and because it's kind of like being an entrepreneur, you just have this little bubble where you're trying to figure out what fits and get the pricing together and get a win-win out of it, right? Where you're making money and the customer is very happy, or at least reasonably happy, right? And so that went on. But then about 2007, some friends approached me that were in the mortgage business, or 2006. And, that's when everybody in the mortgage business was smart and rich.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Sure.
And they had a very good idea for a marketing automation product in the mortgage industry. And part of that entailed this automated printing bit. And I could see how it could fit and how I could add value. So I ended up joining that company and that partnership in 2007. And then and in 2008 was the Great Reckoning.
Yes.
Particularly of the, it was a Great Recession, but it was also particularly hard hit was the real estate industry, which I was servicing. And so I begged and was able to get my job back at HP.
Okay.
And or not my job. Actually, it was an entirely different job, and I was in a situation where I was very uncomfortable because none of the stuff that I learned in my previous life at HP translated over, other than sort of where the bathrooms are and the cafeteria.
Okay.
But that's actually, it's kind of important at HP.
Well,
how the buildings
you
work,
need to know that.
Because, there's like a lot of buildings.
After his second stint at HP, Ben decided to get back into software, leading him to launch SnapShot Postcard as an independent business. Given Ben's ability to move between jobs, companies of different sizes, and careers, I asked him about his approach to taking risks. Your approach to career changes and risk taking, because oftentimes I think that's what stops people from making a change.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to, start over or whatever. So how do you approach that? Because it seems like you've taken a number of risks at different times, whether it's moving or a new job, new career, whatever.
A lot of it I think I do is in my gut. I know what I want to do, and I kind of rationalize myself out till I get, and then I just do it.
Okay.
But and I've made some big mistakes because of that. But I am a firm believer in you do have to do things wrong before you do them right. I mean, you got to make mistakes. When you have a big decision, in my mind, what you do is you do the numbers. And you try and quantify the worst possible outcome. And usually when you do that, the worst possible outcome, you go, well, you know what? That's not that bad. It's a great way to deal with fear, is trying to identify the worst possible outcome.
Yeah, and giving voice to that, I guess, in some way.
Yeah.
Kind of going,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. You go, okay, well, I could drive to work and the meteor would kill me. And then you go, well, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to plan my life worrying about a meteor hitting me, right?
Yeah.
So there's sort of the monetary numbers part of it. And then there's this emotional piece of picturing yourself doing that versus what you are doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think you have to be careful there, because it's very easy to romanticize what you aren't doing yet and be caught up in the doldrums what you are doing. And then when you're doing, step 2, you look back at step 1 and go, man, I really had it made there.
Yeah. The nostalgia piece coming in.
Yeah, totally. And so, so you just have to weigh that out. I've always liked taking risks, but I'm not, I don't jump out of planes or anything.
Yeah.
But, actually I'm scared of heights. but yeah, I've always, it's always kind of the and maybe it's a greed factor, right? The high end of it, I always kind of see the high the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself of the failure part of it. And that's something that, I think it's important to just say, what's the worst outcome?
Yeah.
And if that happens, what are you going to do? People always talk about how short life is.
Mm.
And it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when somebody dies, it's surprising. You're like, oh my God, all the stuff we missed, and life is very short.
Yeah.
And I totally get and believe that, YOLO and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side of that is, we really do live a long time, and you've got a lot of time to recover from your mistakes.
Who has influenced your approach to work?
My dad.
Yeah?
Yeah. He's a retired physician.
Mm-hmm.
And there was 2 things about him. Is he always worked very hard, right? It was always a priority. And Mom used to, it wasn't quite grumbling, but it wasn't that far from it, is she would bring up the fact that he was with his partners for like 10 years before he even looked to see how much vacation he had. And but he always went in early and worked late and would work on the weekends, and he was a great dad, but he worked a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was important to him. And the other thing that I always picked up from him is he was always grateful that he worked in a job he liked so much, right? And I think that kind of influenced me in terms of, hey, I don't like this. This isn't right, as opposed to, it's work. I guess I have to hate it.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
normal to hate it, right? It's I felt like he had built a life where he had a job he loved. I should be able to do the same thing. And I never really consciously thought about that.
Yeah.
I guess till just now.
Ben's advice about finding a job you love starts with how you approach the job you have and acknowledging the temporary trade-offs you may have to make along the way.
I don't like it when I hear people say, oh, I hate my job, right? I mean, in my mind, I think, I get it. I've been in lots of jobs I hate, but you don't make it better by saying you hate it, right? You make it better by saying, I'm glad I have this job because I make money, and for the rest of them, that I can live off of. And then I make a decision if that trade-off's worth it to me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But don't, no one's making me go to work. Yeah. And it's just like, I left Boeing and I said, I've been to Procter & Gamble, I've been to Boeing, big companies are not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And where do I spend the majority of my career at after that? Hewlett Packard.
Yeah.
and it wasn't because I forgot I said that.
Yeah.
It was because I said, you know what? I didn't, after doing it on my own for 5 years and being with a really small company for, 3 or 4, I just took for granted so many of the benefits of being a part of a large company. The security, the pay, is much better to have, the family aspect of it, the work-life balance. And so, I don't regret that time at HP at all. It's just my former self leaving Boeing triumphantly. I would be surprised to know that I was going to spend, 12 more years at a large corporation type thing. Well, and you kind of talk yourself off the cliff and go, you know what? I'm here. I'm in this role because of the security and because I choose to be, right? I mean, in many ways, we're all independent consultants, right?
Yeah.
And I'm here because I choose to be, whether, if I'm taking orders at McDonald's, I can get a job at Burger King.
So knowing what you know now about careers and work, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell myself not to worry about people's titles and positions so much. That is I've always kind of been, reticent to push back on people of a higher rank, if you will, or more seniority.
Yeah.
And good leaders want that. But yeah, I would tell myself just to interact with people on a more personal level. And if you have something of value to add it. And if you have something of interest to ask it.
Yeah.
And don't worry about saying the right thing or keeping everybody happy.
Yeah.
So I'd tell myself that.
One way to improve any job is by making a connection with the people you work with.
I think that emotional connection with people just makes life better, and it really makes it better at the workplace. I mean, people talk about work-life balance, and work is part of life, right? In my mind, it's just have a good life. But there's something implicit about work-life balance meaning work sucks. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're saying, okay, I need this balance because this part sucks.
Finally, Ben offers some overlooked considerations when thinking about your career choice.
I think there's a lot of things that people that aren't commonly talked about in discussions like this, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody talks about, do something, follow your passion, or how to network, or how to do this. But I think there's things on careers that impact you long term that aren't talked about enough. One is, are you choosing a career that locks you into a certain geographical type, right? So are you like if I'm a product manager for a software company, then I probably have to be in a larger city, right? And if I want to be in, if I want to live in a smaller town in rural Idaho or something, it's going to be harder to do. Whereas if I would be a dentist or a doctor or something like that, then you can pretty much live, in any size town. Yeah. And so do you want to live in a city? Or you want to live in rural, right? I mean, and then I think it goes back, and we did talk about this, is what size organization are you comfortable with, right? And it doesn't mean if you're comfortable with a small group and that you can't be part of a big organization. It's just, will you have a role where you basically work with a focused or small group, or are you more part of the mass, right? Part of the big group, or if you're energized by that, then seeking that out. And then I think it's to do something. It doesn't, not necessarily I think it's too much to ask anyone to find something that's their passion. But I do think it's, if you do something you don't believe in, like where you just know you're taking advantage of people, or you're not living true to something, don't do it. Yeah. Or if you have to do it, you actively look for a way out of it. Yeah. And that's, there's always honor in a good day's work, but there's more honor in some than others. Yeah. It's like I mentioned with the postcard business. I really like the fact that I'm doing something good.
So-Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates 50% of all profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SoCalled for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Subscribe and leave us a review. So-Called is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts.